Alright, hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another FNAF reaction stream. And, apologies that it's been a while since we've done a FNAF stream. And also apologies that it's been a few days since we've done a stream. But, unfortunately, I have been reminded that it is the January month, which means it's the winter time. And you know what that means. You get a huge dose of freezing cold temperatures and snow. So this week, it has been fun. You can tell by the sound of my voice. It's been fun to deal with 10 inches of snowfall in the south, in a place that's not known to get any snow. But we get 10 inches. So that's been fun. So, as you can tell by my voice of how fun it has been to be reminded that winter is indeed a season, let us actually dive into something that I would deem is actually fun. And, slightly less confusing and aggravating than the winter months. And that is, of course, the FNAF timeline.
The Crying Child is a character that's in central focus of Five Nights at Freddy's. But that being said, how much do we actually know about this kid? I mean, for Christ's sake, he's a main character of the franchise, and most people still call him the Crying Child. We don't even have close to a confirmed name for him. He's Afton's youngest son. I thought it would be helpful to go over all of the confirmed information we have, some of the speculation, and my personal thoughts on where he fits in the timeline.
Let's just go down the memory list for a second, because we have done previous theory videos on the name of the FNAF 4 Crying Child. At one point, he was named Michael Afton, because as far as William Afton's kids that are important to the timeline, the obvious choice is Michael Afton, the most important child of William Afton. And that was a running theory for years, and then even more so, it was a theory from the FNAF security logbook of how the Michael Afton red tally mark and the other Michael Afton text in the FNAF security logbook is stuff tied to FNAF 4. Like, there's a drawing of Nightmare Fredbear in one of the pages, and the only reason why you would see Nightmare Fredbear is you played FNAF 4, you were the Vite victim, or you were the test subject of William Afton's experiments in FNAF 4. You would have seen Nightmare Fredbear, so that explains it. I know Evan was a name at one point, and that was another name that was tossed around from the FNAF security logbook. And then it changed to Dave is the name of the FNAF 4 Crying Child. And Dave had a lot more, what's the word? It had a lot more spice, I guess you can say, compared to Evan. Because if I'm not mistaken, popular boy names in the UK in like the 1980s, Dave was like, if I'm not mistaken, like top 3 or top 5 most popular boy names in the 80s in the UK. Why that's important is because someone like Elizabeth Afton, who we know exists, is the daughter of William Afton, who goes on to possess Baby. Her name is Elizabeth, and that is also one of the top 3 or top 5 girl names in the UK in the 80s. So hey, if Elizabeth was one of the top girl names in the 80s in the UK, well, here's Evan, also a top name for boys in the 80s in the UK. And now we just call him the Crying Child because we don't know. And that's the furthest we ever got.
like we did for Casty a couple weeks ago. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. The first real mentions of the Crying Child start in FNAF 4, after all that game is basically about him. The game presents itself as the nightmares of the Crying Child, this kid. He remains nameless through the entire game, seems terrified of the animatronics, is relentlessly bullied by his older brother, and takes solace in this Fredbear plushie that is seen everywhere throughout the daytime minigame. But this bullying comes to a head, where on his birthday, the older brother in the Foxy mask and his friends pick up the Crying Child and place his head inside of the jaw of the Fredbear Springlock animatronic, which then shuts and doesn't necessarily kill him. There's dialogue immediately after of people seemingly talking to him in some sort of unconscious state, but at the end of that cutscene there is a flatline-like sound effect. So the thinking is that it sent him into some kind of coma or something, and then he eventually died. Not before hearing the voice that he thought was coming from Fredbear say, "I will put you back together."
Ah, the iconic line, "I will put you back together." And is that Fredbear saying the line? That's one of the many reasons why FNAF 4 is so complicated. Because throughout the entire game, between nights, you are doing those 8-bit minigames, controlling the FNAF 4 Crying Child, and you hear the voice of the spooky Golden Freddy's second friend Fredbear, and he has the yellow text. But then, in the iconic lines of Night 5, where it's like, we're still your friends, do you still believe that? I will put you back together. Yes, the second friend Fredbear is in that scene, but it's a different shade of yellow. And no one's got color details to show that's a different character talking, this is a different person, is everything, because Scott doesn't do coincidences. This is why I have always been pushing this theory, even if this is controversial, and I feel like at this point, this is probably not accepted anymore, but if FNAF sits in Midnight Motorist, why I think the orange Buster Man, the person driving the purple car in the Midnight Motorist minigame, is not William Afton, the purple guy. It's Michael Afton, it's Henry, it's Cassidy, it's Edwin, it's some other named character we never heard of yet, because that makes things very clear and very easy to understand. Because you would think, oh, the person driving this purple car has to be William Afton, because purple is William Afton. It's the Afton color. And what you would expect to see is the person driving the purple car is the purple guy, William Afton. But it's not. Meaning, someone driving a purple car who's not purple, that must mean color details. It's a different person. Meaning, it's not William Afton. But I understand that's controversial. I feel like everyone accepts that no, Midnight Motorist is Orange Buster Man is William Afton. But yeah, color details is something that Scott does a lot. And it's something that he makes very clear of who is talking. Or there's other subtle details where it's like, yeah, color details make you understand certain things. Like, for instance, in FNAF Sister Location, Baby's eyes are blue, right? It's until the end of the cupcake minigame with Baby where their stomach hatch opens and ice cream pops out. Elizabeth Afton walks over, gets close enough, and then is skewered and clawed to death by Baby. Elizabeth Afton has green eyes, and every single time after that is when Baby has green eyes. They have blue eyes until they get the green eyes from Elizabeth Afton. So yeah, color details is something that happens a lot in this series.
Now, when this game came out, we didn't have much context for who these kids were. Many people did assume that they were William Afton's children, but to be fair, by the time of FNAF 4, we didn't even have the name William Afton. The Silver Eyes didn't come out until after this game. In the very next game, Sister Location, we got a lot more context to better color FNAF 4. At first, Sister Location does seem like a completely self-contained game, but by the end of it we start learning more and more about the grander franchise, especially in the private office. Inside of there's monitors and a keypad, and if you punch in 1983, the same year that gets referenced in the daytime minigames, seemingly the year those games take place, the monitors next to it light up with shots of the house we see in the FNAF 4 Nightmares. Pair that with the identical Fredbear plushie and walkie-talkie next to them, and the context this game provides that this whole area is William Afton's laboratory, and pieces start to fall together. The community began to settle on the Crying Child, and by extension his foxy mask-wearing brother, being children of William Afton, who was keeping an eye on them through this walkie-talkie plush and the cameras while doing whatever experiments he did down in these bunkers. William Afton being the same man who did the missing child incident and owned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. But interestingly enough, even though this game gave us the names of the other two children, that being Michael, the older brother who survives, and Elizabeth, their sister who likely slept in this room, this game doesn't give us the name of the Crying Child. And that's a trend that's continued for the rest of the series, because anytime the Crying Child is even remotely mentioned, he's still not named. Well, maybe except for one possibility, but
It's Gregory from Security Breach.
we'll get there in due time. And that's all the confirmed information about the Crying Child, which is admittedly incredibly sparse. So let's talk about possible references to the Crying Child. Now that we know the general aesthetic of the Crying Child and that he's very closely related to Fredbear, many people believe that the FNAF 3 Happiest Day minigame is all about attempting to help the Crying Child move on. And
Yeah, because the whole point of Happiest Day is given a birthday, you as a puppet are given a birthday to a birthday party that was tragically cut short. Whose birthday was it? Oh, it was the birthday boy, the FNAF 4 Crying Child, who on his birthday was shoved in the mouth of Fredbear and bitten, killed. His birthday was cut short. Happiest Day minigame is finishing the birthday for the birthday that was cut short. Got all that?
I think that's a really solid theory. After all, FNAF 4 came out right after FNAF 3, which was basically about the Happiest Day. The Crying Child's last conscious thought is his Fredbear plushie and all of his animatronic friends saying, "We'll put you back together," and in Happiest Day, a bunch of kids wearing the masks of those animatronics put pieces together to help this Crying Child move on. Not to mention how this scene perfectly mirrors the scene of the Crying Child's bite. After all, we have these tables that line up really, really well, and a final room with masked figures affecting the Crying Child's life. Like, it is incredibly likely, if not near confirmed, that Happiest Day is laying the Crying Child to rest. But the question about this theory becomes when? Because theoretically, the Crying Child could move on pretty much at any point in the timeline. As far as we're aware, he doesn't necessarily affect the timeline in any way after he's died. But looking at this minigame, it seems very likely that the other children in the minigame move on as well once the Crying Child moves on himself. And we know that can't happen until FNAF 6, so we'll put a pin in the timeline of that for now. Another possible...
I mean, this probably sounds very unrelated, but in FNAF VR Help 1 and 2, when you finish the Princess Quest 4 minigame, and you're then taken into the Princess Quest minigame itself, where you see the princess, pixel form standing next to you, you grab the sword, and you are the princess now playing the Princess Quest game in the VR mode. You clear out the room, and then you get to the grave site, where it's the 6 grave sites of Chica, Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, Golden Freddy, and the puppet. People have like gone back and forth of, is that the death order or something else? I am personally in the camp that it is something else. It's not the death order. It's the moving on or their souls being laid to rest order. So like Chica is first, which I will say this and I'll always say this. It's bizarre that Chica is first because, you know, you have something like Custom Night where Chica says, you know, I'm the first, I'm the one who's seen everything. But then you have someone like FNAF Sits in Henry's iconic speech who says, you know, my daughter, a wound first put on me that would spread to others. We know Henry's daughter is Charlie, who goes on to possess the puppet. So it's like, well, who's first? Is it Chica? Because they're the first, they're the one who's seen everything? Or is it Henry and a wound first put on me that lets spread to others? Obviously, the others is other kids dying at the hand of his business partner, William Afton, right? But I've always interpreted the lines of, you can have your cake and eat it too. Chica saying, I'm the first, I'm the one who's seen everything. That's not their death. That's not them being the first death. I've seen everything. That means it quite literally where either Susie goes into Chica animatronic, their soul gives life to Chica animatronic and their eyes open to get some new life from the puppet. I don't know. But like that's what it means when they say, I'm the first, I'm the one who's seen everything. Quite literally seen everything. The Susie's consciousness, soul fused with the Chica animatronic, and they were able to open their eyes in the Chica form, and that's how they were able to see everything. They're the first. So you can still have that line, but you're able to have multiple lines and for it to still make sense. Well, I don't know if it does or if, I don't know if it helps at all. But the reason why I bring this up is going back to FNAF VR 2, Help Wanted 2 minigame where it's a grave sites. You light the grave site of Chica, and then I think it's Foxy, Freddy, Bonnie, I think is the order. I could be wrong, but it's the core four. And then it's Golden Freddy, and then it's the puppet is Sits. Which confused people because, like, you know, Henry's, you know, wound for something to me that'll spread to others. But the puppet was Sits in the last torch you light on the gravestones. But how I've always interpreted it is it's the souls coming to consciousness or their souls being laid to rest. That's the order we're lighting. Not the death order, the souls being laid to rest order. So you have the original core 4 animatronics. You light their grave sites because those 4 got laid to rest in the Happiest Day minigame in FNAF 3. Right? Then you get to Golden Freddy, where that could be FNAF Sits. That could be Ultimate Custom Night. Because Ultimate Custom Night is all about Golden Freddy. You beat the impossible 50-20 mode, you see Golden Freddy. We believe the ghostly kid spirit is Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, who is tied to Golden Freddy. We believe the only reason why Ultimate Custom Night exists is Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, is keeping William Afton down there in purgatory and hell for his punishment. So Ultimate Custom Night is the Golden Freddy game. That's how their soul gets laid to rest. And then we get to last, the puppet, who still has not been laid to rest yet. That's why they're last. Because we believe the puppet is like a poltergeist in the Pizza Plats. That's why there's a lot of puppet and Nightmare-owned imagery plushies in the Pizza Plats. Because it's a poltergeist. Their soul, the puppet Charlie, has not been laid to rest yet. They're still vengeful and going after William Afton, whatever form he takes. So that's how you get to lighting Puppet's gravesite last in FNAF VR Help Wanted 2. At least, that's always been my interpretation of those events throughout those games. I'm curious to know what you think.
Reference to the Crying Child are the Bear of Vengeance cutscenes that you can unlock in Ultimate Custom Night. They feature an anime-style dialogue between Freddy and Foxy and Mangle. Freddy trying but failing to conquer Foxy, and Foxy laughing about how easy it is to beat Freddy. Interpretations for these cutscenes go all over the place. Sometimes it's William and Henry, sometimes it's Elizabeth and Michael, but a fairly common interpretation.
I feel like it's Henry and William. Henry is Freddy and Foxy is William. Because Henry, is trying to undo William Afton's sins. He's trying to, get William Afton arrested. He's trying to, go after his former business partner and banish him to the deepest pit of hell, as he said in FNAF 6. But Foxy, William Afton, keeps getting away. He keeps killing more and more and more kids, but he's not getting arrested. Or he is getting arrested, he's getting caught on camera, but he's able to walk freely and open up more locations and kill more kids.
I think is useful to bring up is that Freddy represents the crying child, Foxy represents Michael, and Mangle represents Elizabeth. After all, Michael did wear a Foxy mask and was constantly bullying his younger brother, who probably never got a leg up on him. And then Mangle would be Elizabeth, because if this is Elizabeth's room, clearly she liked Mangle. Again, this is just speculation, but if this connection is true, really the only purpose could...
That's interesting. Because Mangle being in the girl's room is still, to this day, never explained. Right? Still to this day, never explained why there's Mangle in the girl's room in the house of FNAF 4. Because we know Elizabeth Afton goes on a possessed baby, and we know Funtime Foxy is like an earlier version of Mangle because it's a white Foxy with red blushing cheeks and lipstick. But they don't have two heads, but like that feels like a huge stretch. Of like, oh, that's what inspired Mangle as Funtime Foxy from Sister Location. That doesn't really fit cleanly, I don't think.
Show us that seemingly Elizabeth helped Michael bully the crying child, but not much else is gleaned from that. And speaking of weird side games, we do need to talk about FNAF World, because while FNAF World never really directly addresses the crying child, it does talk about FNAF 3 Happiest Day. After all, many people, and myself included, see FNAF World as sort of a retelling of the Happiest Day in general. When you're doing the clock ending, you basically recreate all the steps to access the Happiest Day in FNAF 3. And finally, once you do all of that, you're told that the whole point was to help somebody find their way, to leave breadcrumbs for them, aka helping somebody to move on. If that
the pieces are in place for you, and the pieces are in place for you, now it's up to you to go find them. Those things being the minigames you play in FNAF 3. You click on Balloon Boy 3 times. You click on the cupcakes. Because as a reminder, FNAF 3, you play through the game normally, you get the bad ending. You have to do the extra stuff with Balloon Boy, the cupcakes, and etc. to play those extra minigames to lay the souls to rest and get the good ending.
Interpretation is true, then FNAF World is similarly completely built around the idea of helping the crying child move on. And it's for those reasons, plus all of the connections of Ultimate Custom Night and FNAF World, that I believe Happiest Day takes place after FNAF 6, likely during the fire of it. After all, everyone would be gathered in the same place, and their connection to this realm would be weakened by the incineration. It seems like the perfect time to try to reach out and help the crying child finally find peace. And there's one other source of information about the crying child. We need to bring it up because it's one of the most heavily debated sources of information about the character, but it's not actually a book. Once again, we're going to be talking about the good old security logbook. And if y'all thought the Cassidy puzzle was arbitrary, you're not ready for this one, which isn't even heavily agreed upon. We discussed a couple videos ago that this book was not only used to learn more about Michael Afton and discover the name Cassidy for the vengeful spirit, but it seems clear that the crying child is also involved in this book. He is the one that's changing the text on the page in order to communicate. After all, it fits in logically with what his general character is, and the things he says are very wimpy, which fits in, like I can't see, I don't know, and things like that. So naturally, people were using this book endlessly to see if we could solve what the crying child's name was using it. That way we would finally have all of the names of the Afton family. Well, except for Mrs. Afton, but she never really comes up and Scott doesn't like naming women, so. For a long time, nobody could agree on a methodology on finding the name of the crying child. Someone at one point found the name Evan, but while the evidence for E, V, and A was pretty good, the evidence for the N was lacking, and it was sort of just a, well, this is kind of a name, but
Yeah, that was the issue. Because if I'm not mistaken, it's been several years since the name Evan got brought up. So forgive me if I am misspeaking or misremembering how the Evan name got brought up. But in the FNAF Security Logbook, there is a FOTC grid where it's a large grid. It's like 32 rows up and then 27 rows down. I think, I can't remember the exact dimensions. And very faintly in some of the boxes in the grid, there's an A, B, and C. Leading everyone with 2 brain cells to think, oh, fill in each of those squares in the entire grid so you can go A, B, C, D, E, and fill in the entire grid with letters, right? Because why else would there be letters in the squares? And they were able to get EVA through that method, right? But then the N was a completely separate puzzle where it's like, oh, I was able to get the N by, I think, counting up the tally marks that Michael Afton draws in the corners of the pages or something. But like, the puzzle is completely different. Like, you use the grid, the faded letters for 3 of the letters, but then you use something completely different for the 4th letter. It's like, wait, how does that make any sense? Why would you use one puzzle for 90% of a solution, but the other 10% is using a completely different system that has, where's the correlation between that? And I chalk that up to confirmation bias, where you see EVA and in your head, you see N is the final letter. And knowing that N is the final letter, you reverse engineer a way in your head to get there to be a solution like, oh, this is how N works in the puzzle. Doesn't matter if it has any correlation to the previous puzzle we did, I got N to exist. This is what I believe, and this is how I got there. It's confirmation bias, even though there's no correlation whatsoever. Dave fitted a lot better because at least that name, you use one puzzle to get all the letters, not 3 of the letters to get the puzzle. And in the 4th one, you use confirmation bias and try to reverse engineer a way to get to the solution. But of course, like I brought up in the intro, that Dave was also one of the most popular boy names in the 80s for the UK.
For the N was lacking, and it was sort of just a, well, this is kind of a name. But recently, Hyperdroid made an incredibly compelling video solving the name of the crying child using this book. And with his methodology built off of what we knew from the EVA, he settled on the name Dave. And frankly, it's a theory I believe in. I like to believe the crying child's name is Dave. And it's also a harmless theory, right? Like, if we're wrong about the crying child's name, that doesn't really change anything about the timelines we create. It just makes it easier to say Dave than the crying child. And there are some really cool connections you can make if it's true, like the fact that in the Silver Eyes, William Afton uses the fake name Dave Miller, and this franchise has a history of characters using the fake names of dead characters, so this lines up very well. But to be very clear, this is incredibly heavy speculation. As confident as I am in the theory that the crying child's name is Dave, it is just that, a theory. It's also relatively newer, so most people still use the term the crying child when talking about the character. Not only is Dave not confirmed, but the theory is only like a year or so old.
I would say the FNAF 4 Crying Child will always be named like that, which is annoying because, if I'm not mistaken, FNAF 4 came out in 2015, so this game's over a decade old, and we still don't know the name of the Crying Child, and we still don't know what FNAF 4 is all about, even if the game's over a decade old. I would say it doesn't make it easy. It sucks. But I would say foreseeable future, we refer FNAF 4 Crying Child as the Crying Child until Scott or Steel Wool themselves come on and say, yes, this is the name of the Crying Child. Just like we know Charlotte is a name in the series, or Edwin, or Cassidy.
So it hasn't really caught on yet either. And that's everything we know about the Crying Child, which again, frankly, is not a lot. But the overarching question always comes back to, why does any of this matter? Why should we know things about the Crying Child? After all, like I've mentioned, he doesn't really affect the timeline in any way directly. But that's the thing. The Crying Child isn't important for what he does. The Crying Child is important for what he inspires in other characters. Not only are seemingly two different games completely focused around helping the Crying Child to move on, but there are many arguments to be made that William Afton's motivation to begin killing in the first place was to save the Crying Child's life. After all, once the Crying Child is bitten, one of the things we hear is a voice saying, "I will put you back together." Since it seems likely that William Afton was talking through the Fredbear plushie from what we see in Sister Location, we can assume
That's still just a theory of who's talking.
that voice is likely William Afton, promising his dying son that he will find some way to bring him back, to fix what has happened to him.
Or is it Michael Afton saying, I'm sorry that I shoved you in the mouth of Fredbear and killed you and ended your birthday early. And now I'm going to find a way to put you back together as make amends for what I did. Once again, we have no idea.
Which would essentially be trying to find immortality. In this interpretation, you could contextualize everything William does as stemming from this core purpose, to find immortality to save his dying son, and then eventually getting mad with power and trying to manipulate life itself. Which does line up with what we know about William Afton from the Silver Eyes, who does have a goal of trying to become immortal, whether that be because of a fear of the afterlife because he's sure he's going to hell, or just a manic obsession with power. Annual disclaimer, this is not me saying that I believe in will care, the theory that William Afton actually really cares about his children.
He doesn't, right? Like, does anyone actually believe that? That William Afton's actually a good father? If anyone believes that, please let me know why you think so. Because I don't believe a father who goes around Chuck E. Cheese inspired restaurants, puts on an animatronic suit that could kill you, by the way, goes around animatronic pizzerias, lures kids to a back room and kills them for their own gain of power and immortality, is not an upstanding good father. I feel like that does not need to be said.
Clear he doesn't. He sees them as tools to use at best. Now, I didn't say that I believe in will care in this video, I didn't even imply it. But people are so weirdly angry about that theory that if I don't make this disclaimer, I'm gonna get like 50 angry DMs and I just don't want to deal with it. Anyway, with all of this evidence and speculation in mind, I think we can craft a pretty good timeline around the Crying Child and what his role in the story is. So let's do just that. William Afton was very busy doing whatever it was that he thought was more important than actually taking care of his children. So he came up with a solution. Not only would he watch them through cameras he placed throughout his home, but he would keep track of one of them, the youngest, with a Fredbear plushie he could talk through. And of course have Michael Afton watch over the kid. Sure, Michael picked on his younger brother out of resentment for having to watch him, but that wasn't William's problem. Until it was, when one day the bullying went so far as it led to the accidental death of that very same youngest son. And although William Afton promises to fix him, he eventually dies. But his life was so messy and tragic, with memories left all over the place, that his mind is too broken to move on. He's unable to possess anything, unable to interact or remember what his life even was. All he can do is suffer in silence, alone. And this is how it goes for quite some time, until eventually a spirit does notice him, trying to reach out, asking about his memories, trying to figure out who this child is. And from his own responses, he doesn't even know much. It isn't until someone exceptionally in tune with the spirit realm, in a moment where everyone is loosely connected to the world, that this very same someone is able to contact him, attempting to give any sort of peace to the child. At the FNAF 6 fire, everyone had been gathered and incinerated together, and Charlotte Emily, someone well-versed in helping spirits move on or possess things, is able to see the memories of all the victims in that fire, and in it find the crying child, and using whatever she can, and whatever help she can gather, to put his mind back together, finally allowing the crying child to find peace and rest. It would ultimately be up to him to follow the breadcrumb trail they'd made for him, but the happiest day was formed for him to follow. His birthday was fixed, all in the hopes that the crying child may finally have his day and rest. And that's everything. So why do people think that Gregory is the crying child? And why?
Yep. Here's why. You have a young boy wearing a dark colored shirt with 2 horizontal stripes. What does FNAF 4 Crying Child wear? A shirt with 2 horizontal stripes. Gregory is the FNAF 4 Crying Child.
Why does the crying child have the same bedroom as the mimic? And why does Dave sound an awful lot like David Murray? Honestly, we don't have time for all that. Look at how long this video took just to talk about what the crying child is in the story. We don't have time to talk about what it isn't or what it inspired. As far as the crying child himself goes, this is pretty much it. Unless I'm forgetting something major, which you can let me know in the comments below.
I mean, let's think about that for a second as we are wrapping up here. Dave, the FNAF 4 Crying Child, being linked to David Murray, who is linked to the Mimic. Man, that would be messy. That would be very messy. Because on one hand, you have some similarities. You have the FNAF 4 Crying Child carrying around his favorite plushie, the psychic friend Golden Fredbear. David, his plushie, is the Tiger Rock, the white tiger plushie. So, young kids dying at a young age and holding a plushie, their favorite plushie, that they are later connected with as an animatronic, at least in some way. Tiger Rock is connected to David, and then we believe the FNAF 4 Crying Child is, at very minimum, one of the souls that's tied to Golden Freddy. It's him, Cassie the Vengeful Spirit, right? So that, similar. Right, that's similar. It also does explain, I guess, in maybe the true ending where you ignore hand units commands and you don't give away the schematics and you go down to the original prototype pizzeria and you go into all those Springlock suits. You have like Bub the dog. You have a gator one, which may have been inspired to Monty in Security Breach. Then you have others like Fredbear, right? Which is very bizarre of how a Springlock Fredbear is down underneath that prototype pizzeria. How does it lead to FNAF 4? So, that is interesting. But off the top of my head, those are the David and FNAF 4 connections I can think of at the moment. I'm sure there's stuff that I'm forgetting, So let me know if there's something I'm forgetting, but off the top of my head, that's what I can remember as far as the FNAF 4 Crying Child and David connections. But I don't know. What do you think about the theory? Do you think that FNAF 4 Crying Child is connected to Gregory? Or do you think he's connected to David? Or both? Or are we totally off base and the FNAF 4 Crying Child is someone completely separate and we've been wrong all this time? Very curious to let you know your thoughts.